Hey friends, Ash here with Gents. Hope you're doing really well today. Today, I'm going to be going over with you guys 10 different classic colognes or fragrances for men that still work. These fragrances have been around. They've seen a lot of use over the years from a lot of people, but they still work. Some of these are going to be older than other ones. Some of these are going to be more immediately recognizable than other ones, but they're all super solid fragrances, and most of them were huge hits when they first came out and have stood the test of time. For the purposes of this video, I'm considering something a classic if it is older than 1995 as far as the release date goes. I know that it seems kind of arbitrary. 25 years, I decided that was a pretty good cutoff point. If you wanted to go really, truly classic, you could go back 50 years, I guess, but for the purposes of this video, 25 is what I'm using. Let's jump into it. I'm gonna give you guys the fragrance, the year it was released, some of the notes, how it smells to me, lots to talk about. Let's just get this going with Green Irish Tweed from the House of Creed, released in 1985. Lemon verbena, iris, violet leaf, ambergris, sandalwood, some of the notes in this fragrance. It does get compared to Davidoff's Cool Water. There's a definite similarity between the two of the fragrances. I prefer Green Irish Tweed though. And I guess you could technically include Cool Water in this list as well, though I'm not, but I just did. This one is fantastic. It's clean, it's fresh, sophisticated, gentlemanly. Said this a million times. Smells like a walk through the Irish countryside. Green, fresh, awesome. That's this scent. And it was definitely not perfumed by Pierre Bourdon. Absolutely, positively not. For sure, definitely not. Pierre Bourdon, of course, is the perfumer of Davidoff Cool Water. And he did not do Green Irish Tweed and then go on to do Cool Water. That didn't happen. That's all sarcasm. He definitely did it. Green Irish Tweed though, one of my favorites of all time. It is timeless. This fragrance is still gonna smell good 40 years from now. It is never gonna get old. Next up, let's go with the Davidoff. Let's go with Xeno from 1986. This one, even though it is 34 years old, gets compared to a new release from this year, Tom Ford's Beau de Jour. Does it smell exactly like Beau de Jour? No, it does not. But does it smell pretty close, especially when you consider the enormous price difference and the 34 years in between the Davidoff and the Tom Ford? Yeah, it does. Patchouli, sandalwood, rosewood, and lavender, some of the notes in this fragrance. It does give you a little bit of that clean, gentlemanly, barbershop kind of vibe, and actually a number of fragrances on this list do have barbershoppy facets to them. And really, a lot of them smell gentlemanly as well, so I probably will just stop using that as a descriptor right here. But it could apply to a lot of the fragrances I'm going to be talking about, so keep that in mind, I guess. Fantastic bang for the buck. This is one of the fragrances that put Davidoff on the map for most people, along with the aforementioned Cool Water. This one really is a classic to me. Like I said, you can see the inspiration for this fragrance even up to today with Beau de Jour. So obviously this one still works if they're still taking inspiration from that fragrance and putting it into new ones that are becoming bestsellers today. Next up, a fragrance release from 1994, Dolce Gabbana's Pour Homme. Not light blue, which is what most people will think of now with Dolce & Gabbana. They think of light blue and all the flankers that came after it for men, but the original Dolce & Gabbana based off of tobacco. Well, tobacco and lavender and citrus and pepper, but still a tobacco note in there. This one has been reformulated over the years, and a lot of people will swear that the original release, the original formulation of Dolce & Gabbana's Pour Homme is light years better than what you'll find nowadays. There is a difference between the two, and the original is better. I'll definitely say that. But for most people out there, like 99% of you, it's not really gonna make a big difference to you. Now, if you wore this back when it came out and you have strong memories of it from then, that's a different story. This one barely made the cutoff in terms of the year, just by one, but it still works. You'll still see it being sold everywhere in Sephora's and Belk's and Macy's. It still sells, people still wear it, it still works. Next up, let's go back in the past a little further. Let's go to 1978. And go with Azzaro Pour Homme. Anise, lavender, leather, and oak moss along with some citrus are some of the notes that make up this one. And this one is one of the classic barbershop fragrances, and it's also a heck of a deal. You can find this at discounters for next to nothing, and it is one of, not necessarily the, but one of the best designer barbershop fragrances that you're ever gonna find. And actually the flanker for this one, Azzaro Pour Homme Intense, is really good as well. Not necessarily super close to this one, and definitely not a classic, just wanted to throw that out there. Azzaro Pour Homme, super clean, smells like you're really well put together when you got this one on. Great in the office, great in business situations, really just great anytime that you want to have a high-class barbershop type of scent. So a very good fragrance during the day, good in spring, good in fall. You could also pull it off in summer or winter, but for me, better in neutral weather. Next up, another cheapie, a 1989 release, Sung Homme from Alfred Sung. This one you may have seen in TJ Maxx or Ross's if you live in the US. Comes in a purple bottle. It does look a little bit cheap, or actually the fragrance itself is purple, the glass isn't. This one has fir, pine needles, it's got citrus, it has oak moss and aldehydes. This one is another barbershop-y type of scent. Between this one and the last one I just spoke about, I would go with the Azzaro Pour Homme if you've never smelled either. But for the price that this one goes for, it is an absolute steal. This one still works. Gets overlooked because it is so cheap, because it, again, is found at TJ Maxx all the time. People just kind of overlook it because the presentation maybe looks a little, again, cheap. It doesn't look like a whole lot went into it. But the scent itself has been working for decades, and there's a reason you can still find it. This is, though, going to be in a similar vein, similar style to the last one. Now let's kick it way back to 1951 for number 89 from Floris. This is the fragrance of James Bond. If you have read the novels or seen the films, I'm sure you're aware of who James Bond is, but this is the fragrance that he wears. Lavender, rose, citrus, neroli, and oak moss. Yeah, oak moss, again, are some of the notes in this fragrance. And this one is a very suave type of scent. It is a little more mature. As it dries down, it gets kind of a powdery nature to it, but it smells really high class. And while it does have that little bit of powder as it dries down, in the opening, it's actually pretty fresh. So it starts off fresh, again, very mature, and as it dries down, gets that little bit of powder from the rose. Being from Floris, this one is going to be a little more expensive than some of the other fragrances on this list, but absolutely worth having in your collection if you like that old school, again, suave, sophisticated, mature, manly kind of scent. That's what this is. Next up, a fragrance from 1994, XS from Paco Rabanne. This fragrance smells like a more affordable designer version of Creed's Himalaya, because that's pretty much exactly what it is. And in case you're curious, XS came first. Creed Himalaya came afterward. Bergamot, rosemary, musk, juniper, and mint are some of the notes in this fragrance. Very refreshing, very brisk off the top. Spray this one on, it's metallic, fresh, in your face. Again, pretty much like Creed Himalaya. This one absolutely still works. Paco Rabanne could have axed this one over the years if it didn't. I mean, Paco Rabanne has axed a number of fragrances, flankers especially, of different scents that they have, but they kept this one. They actually even switched it into a newer bottle style, which is the Pure XS bottle style. It used to come in a bottle that was taller and thinner, still had that kind of Zippo cap, and now it comes in the shorter sort of gradient bottles. This one, XS, I still like. I'll still wear this. I like Creed Himalaya as well, and even though this one has been out for a little while, but 26 years now, I think it still works. Next up, from 1988, Dior Fahrenheit. Gotta have Fahrenheit in here. Does it have sort of a petrol gasoline vibe in the opening because of violet? Yeah, sure does, but I love that. I love that smell of petrol. Actually, if I could get it even ramped up even more, I'd like it that way. I've got vintage bottles of this fragrance. I have modern bottles. I've got some of the different reformulations that happened with Dior Fahrenheit. It's great any way you slice it. I'm not gonna go into too much detail as far as that goes, or else we're gonna be here forever. But some formulations of Fahrenheit have less violet and have more of like a vanillic sweetness to them. Either way, Fahrenheit rules. There's lavender in here, there's leather, there's cedar. It's a great fragrance, a timeless fragrance. There's a reason Fahrenheit kicked off so many different flankers. Fahrenheit, the original, still works. It's really masculine, especially when you compare it to some of the fragrances that have been released over the past 5-6 years, but it's never gonna go old, never gonna go out of style, because I said so. Up next, from 1992, Pacha de Cartier, the Eau de Toilette. Some familiar notes here: lavender, mint, oak moss, again, caraway in this fragrance. This one also has a little bit of that barbershop-y feel to it. It's got a fresh opening. A lot of that has to do with the mint, tempered with lavender. As it dries down, you get more of that oak moss and sandalwood. This one is very classy, classic, again, kind of a timeless feel to the fragrance. It does have a similarity to Ralph Lauren's Safari, which came out right around the same time. So if you spray Safari on and Pacha de Cartier on the other arm, you're gonna get a real similar vibe between the two of them. So if you've never smelled this one, but you have smelled Safari, you have a decent idea of how this one's gonna smell, and also a decent idea of whether you'll like it or not. For me, Pacha de Cartier is a fragrance that I owned for years, and I never really wore it or anything. It just kind of sat there on the shelf. And one day I went by and picked it up, and I was like, well, let's give this a go again. Sprayed it on and I was blown away. I was like, whoa, why have I slept on this for so long? Again, you have to have a real appreciation for this style of fragrance, for a more classical style of men's scent, and this one is decently loud as well. Good projection, good longevity. As long as you appreciate that, you're going to appreciate this. Now, some of you are thinking the last fragrance is going to be Drakkar Noir, because I love Drakkar Noir, but it is not. And that's just because Drakkar Noir is the most classic, timeless fragrance of all time, and everybody knows that. So I just couldn't include it because it's just too obvious. Am I playing? Am I being sarcastic? Well, maybe a little bit, but do I absolutely love Drakkar Noir? Yeah, of course. It was just too obvious. That's why it's not here, even though I am mentioning it right now. Okay, last fragrance, 1995, right at the cutoff, Le Male from Jean Paul Gaultier, of course perfumed by Francis Kurkdjian. Lavender, mint, vanilla, tonka, cinnamon, some of the notes in this fragrance. Countless people still wear this one. It was a huge hit when it came out. It is still a huge hit. Flankers for this come out every single year, multiple flankers. So the DNA of this is alive and well. I mean, look at this year. Le Male de Parfum came out, 2020 release, and that is the DNA of Le Male, just tweaked and made a little more modern. Le Male itself, though, the original, still works. Has it been worn to death by people all over the world? Yeah, but it still works. It's a little bit powdery, it's sweet, but it is a huge compliment puller even to this day. Really, the biggest drawback with this one is how many people have worn it. So there's a possibility that your girlfriend's ex wore Le Male. And so if you wear it, you're gonna smell like her ex. And just to really quickly throw this out there, Cuba is a fragrance company. They have the little cigar bottles that makes clone fragrances. So they have a fragrance called Cuba Gold. If you go onto Fragrantica or other places like that, it will show that it was released in the 1970s. So some people will say, oh, on Fragrantica, it says that Cuba Gold was released in the 70s. Therefore, Le Male came out afterward, and this is just a clone of Cuba Gold. That's actually not the case at all. With those things on Fragrantica, all that the company has to do is say, hey, Fragrantica, here's my fragrance. It was released in 19 whatever. And Fragrantica is gonna put it up on there as being released in 1970 whatever. Show me a bottle of Cuba Gold made in the 70s. You can't. They don't exist. It's just sort of a marketing thing that Cuba Gold did, where they didn't want it to be as obvious that they were just knocking off Le Male. So they were like, hey, just give them an arbitrary date in the 70s that this was released. They can't really fact check it. They'll put it on there and everybody will buy it. So, or buy it as an original rather than a clone. So that one, Jean Paul Gaultier Le Male, gonna wrap this list up of 10 different classic fragrances released before 1995 that still work today. Let me know in the comments some of the classic fragrances that you still wear or that you really like, that you think still work today just as well as when they were first released. Maybe something like Dior Eau Sauvage, Eau de Toilette. That one for sure I think does. All right guys, that's gonna do it for me. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Thanks for all your support. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you tomorrow with another fragrance video. See you guys.